Oh man, I hate to use the phrase "let me be clear," but let me be clear. Stephanie White is objectively one of the worst coaches I have ever seen. She has no business being at this level. She is in way over her head, and unfortunately, she's also an abusive narcissist, and she will never recognize that fact. And we're going to get into that a little more in a minute. And I use the word abusive very specifically for a very legitimate reason, which we will see here shortly. But we have to take a step back and just look at what she does. Forget all the Caitlin Clark drama for a minute. Her offense is very, very fifth grade basic. They basically run a three-man weave, and then she hopes that the talent overcomes the fact that she can't coach. The defense, as we have seen many times, and the Fever do this more than any other team in the league, is switch on everything no matter what. You know what that does? That gives the other team the exact matchup they want every single time down the court. And one of the things you were seeing from it is Raven Johnson. We keep hearing about her great defense, and I didn't mean that as a knock on Raven Johnson. Actually, my point being she played 10 minutes and fouled out. Caitlin Clark got into foul trouble. Now, there's a couple reasons for that. One is they aren't giving her any calls with this whole new freedom of movement thing, but they're using that as an excuse to get Caitlin Clark in foul trouble early every single game, which of course is going to make Caitlin Clark less effective. So they're using that rule change now and using the officials to diminish Caitlin Clark, to cage Caitlin Clark. But again, you're also seeing, which is why I brought up Raven Johnson and her foul trouble, is the other team is able to isolate mismatches every single time down the court because Stephanie White has no idea, no understanding of defensive concepts, no understanding of how to make adjustments. She just says switch on everything. Why? Because there is no foundation from her to do anything else. She can't walk her teams through what she wants to do in terms of not switching on everything, in terms of how other players should be positioned defensively, where they should be to help, where help should come from certain positions, from certain spaces on the court. And then you add in the fact that you have a basketball IQ player like Caitlin Clark, who knows more than Stephanie White, and Stephanie White being the fraud that she is as a coach and the insecure narcissist that she is as well. She cannot answer very basic questions from players as, well, why are we doing this? Why are we not doing this? Which, by the way, any great player who wants to get better is going to have those questions for the coach. But Stephanie White doesn't want those questions because she can't answer those questions. So it's just her philosophy is we're going to switch on everything. That's what it is. Go do it. Offensively, we're going to run the three-man weave, make something happen. And she will not relinquish control. Now you get into a little bit of the fact that she has serious jealousy and resentment issues when it comes to Caitlin Clark, which just makes everything worse. But as we saw last night, Stephanie White simply can't coach, and she's not being held accountable for anything. Now, listen to this. Now, the game, for those of you that watched it, the Indiana Fever started up 8-2. Caitlin Clark was responsible for all 8 points. She had a bucket, which is a nice little fadeaway jumper right around a little bit past the foul line. I think it was about a 16-footer. And she had 3 assists, and they were great assists. One on a cut to the basket by Kelsey Mitchell for a layup. One was Aaliyah Boston. I think it was about a three-quarter court thing, was a great pass. And I think the other one was Aaliyah Boston as well, if I'm not mistaken, in the half court set. So understand, even though it didn't seem like it, and as you can see from this picture here, Aaliyah and Caitlin not too happy on the bench. It started out really, really well for the Fever. Caitlin Clark started out really, really well, ended up having one of her worst games in her WNBA career, but it started out really well. But here's the thing, 8-2 lead, three fantastic assists from Caitlin Clark, and a bucket from Caitlin Clark, accounting for all 8 points. What happened next? The same thing that always happens when Caitlin Clark starts out like this. She got benched. About 3 minutes into the game, Caitlin Clark sat on the bench. Guess what happened next? Correct me if I'm wrong. I know a lot of people say 15-2 run, but I think it was 17 because I think a lot of people say 15-2 or taking it from 8-4. But, well, you know what? I think Caitlin might have gone out when it was 8-4, but they were up 8-2. And so I'll go with 15. I think it might have been 17. But we'll go with Caitlin Clark while on the bench. the Portland Fire went on a 15-2 run and never looked back, as has happened previously this season. The Fever start out well. Caitlin Clark gets benched early because, hey, we can't have that. The other team goes on a massive run. The Indiana Fever never recover. Now, while the media, of course, simps for Stephanie White and doesn't really do their job, at least she was asked about, hey, why did Caitlin Clark come out so early? And her answer is complete BS. Well, AB is still on a minutes restriction. I find that incredibly hard to believe at this point in the season. I don't buy that for a second. So that's why she's coming out, and that's typically around the same time that we've taken Caitlin out before, maybe here or there, but no, that is not typical. We didn't in Golden State because, quite honestly, we didn't want Raven in that environment without another ball handler on the floor, but that's been our typical substitution pattern. That makes no sense. Raven, who played and won championships at South Carolina, you're not going to put her on the court because there are a lot of fans at the game for an away game. That in itself is absolute stupidity. But this is all gibberish. This is all gibberish before. This is a lie. And here's the thing. Let's even say it's not a lie. Let's say, okay, that is true. Every single game you take Caitlin Clark out after a fast start 3 minutes into the game. Okay, so you're admitting that you're a terrible coach because no good coach, no decent coach would do that. It makes zero sense. You have the best player in the WNBA and you're taking her out 3 minutes into the game. And it always seems when she's at a fast start. Again, 2 points, 3 assists. The team is up 8-2. She's accounted for all 8 points for the team, and she heads to the bench. She ends up taking only 7 shots the entire game. Stephanie White did that. Stephanie White did that, right? Oh, by the way, because this is another thing people are getting very upset for. And again, it goes to the Stephanie White coaching. I'm crying. Yes, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11 players. Stephanie White played 11 players in the first quarter. Most professional basketball teams don't play 11 players, period, consistently. Sometimes here or there with injuries and maybe with, foul trouble. But most benches just don't go that deep during the regular season, maybe the second night of a back-to-back, that sort of thing. But typically, you might only play 8 or 9 players for an entire game. Stephanie White thought it was smart to play 11 players in the first quarter of this game. That is absolutely nuts. Now, I want to remind you about something Alyssa Thomas said last year when Phoenix put BTA on the Indiana Fever. It's a huge advantage. Like you said, we played, 2 years under White? Everything is pretty much the same stuff. Defense, offense, we know everything they're about to do. And Stephanie White has still not made any changes. She has not made any adjustments because, again, please understand, she is a terrible, terrible basketball coach. Set aside all of the Caitlin Clark stuff, okay? I'm separating Caitlin Clark from the Stephanie White stuff, although there are issues there and they make everything a million times worse. But objectively, Stephanie White is an incompetent coach. She does not grasp the game of basketball, which of course adds another problem when it comes to Caitlin Clark. Stephanie White, being the control freak, insecure narcissist that she is, she has a player who is light years ahead of what Stephanie White ever was, who is light years ahead of anything any player entering this league has ever been able to do. And she has a basketball IQ that dwarfs Stephanie White. What happens when you have a superstar who understands the game better than a coach? You have problems if that coach has an ego, and Stephanie White has a massive ego, and she is a petulant little child. Do I need to go back to when she was asked about injury status and this and that, and she has told them, oh, go to the medical staff, and one of the reporters, credit to the reporter, said, hey, the medical staff doesn't talk to reporters, and Stephanie White, in that condescending, you want to smack her face. I'm not advocating violence, please understand, but you know what I'm saying. You know that tone. She goes, oh, I'm sorry, as if she didn't know, right? That's the type of person you have as a head coach. That cannot work. It cannot work. I have an example in Philly real quick. I know some of you get tired of hearing it, but we have a quarterback just like Caitlin Clark in terms of this thirst of knowledge and understanding of the game and wanting to always know more and be better and understand and know why things are happening and what we can do to get better. And we had an offensive coordinator this past season, got fired at the end of the season, who really was terrible, never should have been there. It was his first year ever being an offensive coordinator, and he gets it for the defending Super Bowl champs way over his head. Ran very, very basic stuff that had the offense struggling and had a quarterback who would say, hey, why are we doing this? Why are we doing that? Not in a I've got an attitude way, I know more way, but in a, I want to understand so I it can help me become a better player, which makes my teammates better, which makes the team better. But the offensive coordinator had no answers. Stephanie White, same thing. She doesn't have answers for players who want to know what is going on and why we are doing certain things. That is a huge problem. That cannot work. That cannot work. We had stuff like this. This is AB, and I think you'll see Sophie as well. But this is AB and Caitlin on the bench toward the end of the game. Neither one of them looks very happy. They're having a conversation. Look at AB's face, right? Like, look, I have been vocal at times about being iffy in terms of Aaliyah Boston having Caitlin Clark's back on the court. She never seems to get involved in certain things. And I go back and forth as to whether that's a real issue with Caitlin Clark or that's, AB's personality. She did do it once where she kind of slowed down Angel Reese after that. But I will say this. I don't think AB is one of those players who wants to or tries to diminish Caitlin Clark on the court, who has that type of jealousy. I think she understands how much better she is with Caitlin Clark, right? So, and look at their faces. Look at AB's face. Do you think she is happy with the way things? This is more than just a bad loss, folks. This is a problem with this coach, who I think, despite some players maybe having issues with Caitlin Clark, where there's player problems as well, I think Stephanie White has lost the entire locker room. Once a coach loses a locker room, they don't get it back, and a change has to be made. Again, another Philadelphia example, recent, because the Philadelphia Phillies started 9-19 this season. Okay, it's 162 games, because I know we got the Slurp FC Stephanie White scissor stimps out there about, oh, it's early, it's 10 games in, blah blah blah. 10 games in is almost 25%. It's a quarter of the season. Okay, 9-19. That's only 28 games out of 162. Not even close to a quarter of the season. But Philadelphia and the Phillies have the expectation of World Series this year. So guess what? 9-19. He seemed to have lost the locker room a little bit. Fired. 9-19 start, 162 games season, but expectations of a title. Fired. You know what the Phillies have done since 9-19? They've gone 21-9. You absolutely can turn around a season in the middle of it by firing the coach when it is warranted, and it is absolutely warranted right now. But again, you can see the conversation they're having. Now watch this. Watch Sophie's reaction to whatever it is Stephanie White says. That was a what? That was an okay, right? I want to run this through one more time. Just pay attention to the expressions, to the body language, and especially because it cuts off quickly. Watch Sophie's reaction. Okay, she's like, really? Did I really just hear that? I'm going to say okay and move along, even though it makes no sense at all. The locker room is lost. Stephanie White is not a leader. Stephanie White is not the coach for this team. It is at the point where, and look here, I have no faith that Amber or Kelly is going to fire Stephanie White. They're all in it together. What we need is some serious impact from the fans. And I get that a lot of people, like, for the foreseeable future, most tickets have already been bought, right? Like, you're not all of a sudden going to have a game where there's 4,000 people. Well, you could have a game where there's 4,000 people there, even if 12,000 tickets were sold, right? Will people not show up? Another thing I'd like to see, which we won't, because the Fever fans are not that way, but they need to get that way, because again, this type of thing, I promise you, if this were Philly, but it's not just Philly, if this were any real serious sports town with expectations, New York, Boston, um, you know, Chicago, maybe it used to be Chicago. I promise you, the next home game, booze would be raining down constantly. Now they would be for the coach in this situation, not so much the player. They would be for the GMs as well, but the fans would absolutely be letting this franchise know that they are extremely unhappy and changes need to happen. We cannot go through an entire season without a change, because I promise you by the end of the year the Fever will be playing in front of 27 people, which, by the way, how come we never see ratings this year? I don't think we've seen ratings for what, more than one or two Fever games? Why are we not seeing the ratings? We used to see the ratings. Are they that bad? What do you think happens when bad ratings again trigger for the CBA in 2028? That 11-year thing is not a guarantee. Okay, this is a problem for the Indiana Fever. And then I want to finish up with this for those who don't say it. And everything I know, yes, this, folks, is actually real. Stephanie White, again, just a great example of who Stephanie White is. Pay attention to this. Stephanie White, and look, man, I will come out and say, hey, I got this one wrong. But from everything I could find and see, yes, this is legit. This is not AI. This is the real deal. If it turns out that it was, well, it won't change any of my overall arching thing, but this is a serious problem, folks. And I'm telling you right now, what do you think the players are thinking when they see something like this? And by the way, because you're going to get the haters, the Hatelins, the Slows, and all that, who are going to go after Caitlin for this. But Caitlin is sitting there listening while Stephanie White yells. And I'm guessing she mentioned something about defense, because all Caitlin did was put up her arms to indicate this is what I'm doing. And if you watch the game, it's exactly what she's doing. Her calls should not have been against her. By the way, the Portland Fire coach challenged two calls, won both of them. They had a huge impact on the team because they took away, I think, Gustafson's third foul, and they also gave the Fire a bucket because one was an offensive call on a drive to the basket. They were huge. Stephanie White didn't challenge anything. She could have easily kept Caitlin Clark out of foul trouble because Caitlin Clark had fouls against her that were absolutely not fouls. But Stephanie White doesn't care. Stephanie White is okay with Caitlin Clark getting into foul trouble because she can use that as an excuse to limit her minutes to 21 like she played last night. But this is a serious problem. This is an insecure narcissist with a huge ego who thinks everything is about her instead of the superstar player she has. Now, the one thing I will say that is kind of irksome is at some point soon, Caitlin Clark needs to stand. And look, it can be behind the scenes, right? It can be something that we don't necessarily know about other than the end result, which is Caitlin Clark getting traded. Or, hey, maybe Caitlin Clark says, look, here's how it's going to. And by the way, it happens all the time, right? It happened this past season with Jimmy Butler. He was sitting out games. He wasn't playing in Miami. Why? Because he said he'd had enough. He demanded a trade. He said I'm not playing anymore until you trade me. Caitlin Clark needs to have a little of that. Caitlin Clark needs to go and say, look, if you're not going to make changes, you're going to trade me. And I'm sitting out. I'm not risking injury. Trade me. Because how do you think that's going to look for the league? How do you think that's going to look for the media that paid the money, the advertisers that are paying the money when they see, hey, we've got this new CBA, we're paying all this money, and Caitlin Clark's not playing? That is not going to be a good look. But look, Stephanie White is, and I don't think I mentioned this at the beginning. I got wound up. She is not just a fraud of a coach, not just a narcissist with a huge ego. She's abusive. This is an abusive relationship that she has with Caitlin Clark. Make no mistake about that. The way she behaves, the way she acts, it is classic abuser, abusey behavior, the way she's acting toward Caitlin Clark. And I just pray Caitlin Clark has enough decent people around her that they keep her from fully submitting and cracking to this awful, awful human being who happens to be her coach right now. And she stiffens that spine and says, you know what? No, enough's enough. I'm the one with the leverage. I'm the superstar. I got the CBA. I bring in the fans. I am not going to continue to do this with this team and with this coach. Changes must be made. Enough is enough. There's so much more I want to say, so much more I want to talk about. I'll probably have other videos, and I'm not going to just say the same things, but there's a lot of other stuff I want to talk about as well, because I feel like that game was a breaking point. They played a terrible game the game before, right? Now we've got another one. We got a team that looks like they don't care. And I'm not even putting that on the team. Like I think they are defeated mentally having Stephanie White as their coach. They have checked out. They are no longer responding to Stephanie White. She has completely lost the locker room. And people will point to certain things and interaction. Look, I don't care what the interaction is between coach and player when they're putting on a public front. What I'm paying attention to is what is happening when it matters. What's being said when it matters, how players are reacting in body language when it matters, the coaching decisions on the court when it matters. That's what's indicative of whether or not a coach has the locker room and a coach truly has support of a player above and beyond what a player is going to say publicly. Because I've talked about this in previous videos as well. Caitlin Clark in press conferences and those controlled environments is always going to say the right thing. That is simply who she is. And I give her a lot of credit for that. It is not an easy thing to do, right? It is not an easy thing to do to go out and praise play, constantly be asked about players on other teams that take cheap shots and dirty shots at her, and to praise them and to say, oh, it's just basketball, especially when you're the fiery competitor Caitlin Clark is, because I promise you, that is not what she's thinking in her brain. That is not what she wants to say. She probably leaves those things for, I don't know, like exchanges with Tiffany Hayes and so forth. But anyway, I'm going to leave it there. This got insanely long. Like, comment, subscribe. Y'all know the drill. I will talk to you later.